The halls of the United States Senate recently witnessed a powerful exchange that has sent shockwaves through Washington. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee delivered one of the most scathing critiques of the previous administration's Department of Justice that we've seen in recent memory. Her words were direct, her accusations serious, and her message unmistakable. The weaponization of federal law enforcement agencies against political opponents must end. But this wasn't just another partisan back and forth. This hearing revealed something deeper, a fundamental disagreement about the very nature of justice in America. Should there be one standard of law for all citizens, or can political considerations justify different treatment for different people? The answer to that question goes to the heart of what it means to live in a constitutional republic. Today, we're going to break down exactly what was said in the Senate hearing, who was involved, what the accusations mean, and why this matters for every American citizen. We'll examine Senator Blackburn's pointed questions about surveillance operations targeting sitting senators, her concerns about what she calls a two-tier system of justice, and the Attorney General's response about ending what he describes as the weaponization of the Justice Department. As we go through this, I want you to consider, do you believe federal law enforcement agencies were used politically under the previous administration, or do you think these are exaggerated claims? Keep that question in mind as we examine the evidence presented.
I have found this hearing to be so instructive because it has pointed out to me the lack of caring from my colleagues across the dais when it comes to how the DOJ under Biden was weaponized, how they used this for political attack on their political opponents, and the smugness from some of my colleagues across the dais. I think they enjoyed it. I think they wanted it to continue. And I think that's why they oppose some of the reforms that you are making to actually get people out across the country and to get them working, and to have people that are actually finding out what the FBI and the DOJ did. You look at what happened with Crossfire Hurricane and the way some Democrats tried to blow that up and make it some big issue and all about Donald Trump and the accusations, and of course, they've been proven wrong. You look at what has happened, what we're finding out about Arctic frost, and the way we were surveilled, and the way Senator Graham, Senator Hawley, and I, we don't know what all they got. We don't know who all they tracked. But to tap our phones, to pull that data for these wireless companies to have allowed them to have that, and for them to use it in their investigations. How disgusting is that? And their attitude and lack of concern about the weaponization of the DOJ. I've had a couple of colleagues who have been so concerned about some bureaucrats at the DOJ and the FBI being fired. You know what? If they did wrong, not only fire them, prosecute them. And my hope is that as we look at what happened with Arctic frost, that there will be a special counsel, that we will do our due diligence, and that those who did this wrong, this illegal activity, absolutely, they need to be prosecuted, and they need to face the full extent of accountability within the law. I made a note of how resistant they are to reform. And in my opinion, what this shows is that they don't want one tier of justice. What they want is two tiers of justice. It was their play box. They could get in there and manipulate and use it to spy on us. So they saw this as something that furthered their political goal. So I am pleased that you are cleaning house. And those who have not served the American people well, fire them. They need to be gone. They need to be gone. Talk for a moment, just a moment, about what you're doing to end the weaponization.
Senator Blackburn didn't mince words when she began her questioning. She accused her Democratic colleagues of not just tolerating, but actually enjoying what she characterized as the weaponization of the Department of Justice under the Biden administration. This is an extraordinary claim that members of Congress would support using federal law enforcement agencies for partisan political purposes. Her specific reference to smugness suggests she observed body language and attitudes from Democratic senators during the hearing that indicated they weren't troubled by allegations of DOJ misconduct. Whether you agree with her interpretation or not, it's clear she believes there's a fundamental divide in how the two parties view recent DOJ actions. Senator Blackburn brought up Operation Crossfire Hurricane, which was the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into potential links between Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and the Russian government. This investigation has been controversial from the start, with Republicans arguing it was based on flimsy evidence and represented an attempt to undermine Trump's presidency. The Durham report, released in 2023, did find significant problems with how the FBI initiated and conducted this investigation, including relying on unverified information from the Steele dossier. Senator Blackburn's point here is that, despite these findings, she believes Democrats have never acknowledged the problems with this investigation or apologized for supporting it. What do you think about investigations into political campaigns? Should there be a higher standard of evidence before launching such investigations? Or do potential national security concerns justify acting on preliminary information? This is where Senator Blackburn's testimony becomes particularly alarming. Arctic Frost appears to be the name of an operation or investigation that involved surveillance of sitting United States senators, including Blackburn herself, along with Senators Lindsey Graham and Josh Hawley. According to Senator Blackburn's account, this surveillance included accessing their phone records through wireless companies. She describes this as tapping our phones and pulling data from telecommunications providers. If accurate, this represents an extraordinary breach of separation of powers, the executive branch surveilling members of the legislative branch. The senator's frustration is palpable when she says, quote, "We don't know what all they got," and, quote, "We don't know who all they tracked." This uncertainty itself is troubling. Members of Congress handle sensitive information, communicate with constituents about personal matters, and coordinate legislative strategy. If those communications were monitored without their knowledge, it raises serious questions about both civil liberties and the balance of power between government branches. Senator Blackburn called this activity disgusting and illegal, and she demanded accountability, stating that those responsible should not just be fired, but prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The Attorney General, who appears to be testifying during the Trump administration based on the context, agreed with Senator Blackburn's concerns. He acknowledged that the surveillance of senators should greatly concern all of us, and emphasized that it should concern Democrats and Republicans alike. His response highlighted several key points. First, he stated there was a two-tiered system of justice under the Biden administration that they're learning about every day. He specifically mentioned Special Counsel Jack Smith, who led the federal prosecutions against Donald Trump, as an example of weaponizing the Justice Department. The Attorney General's statement that weaponization is over and his promise of a one-tiered system of justice represents the current administration's position that they're correcting past abuses. He emphasized that no one is above the law, which is interesting phrasing because it's typically used by those prosecuting powerful individuals, but here it's being used to suggest that previous DOJ officials who allegedly abused their power should face consequences. Senator Blackburn reminded the Attorney General that surveillance concerns aren't new. She referenced her role as vice chair of President Trump's transition team in 2016 and noted that there was surveillance that took place on the transition and on the transition team. This is a reference to the unmasking controversy and the surveillance of individuals like General Michael Flynn, Trump's incoming national security advisor. The fact that this happened during a presidential transition, when the incoming administration should have been able to plan and organize without interference from the outgoing administration, made it particularly controversial. By bringing this up, Senator Blackburn is establishing a pattern. This is not the first time, it's the second time. She's arguing that there's a history of the intelligence and law enforcement apparatus being used against Trump and his associates. Senator Blackburn was explicit about what she wants to see happen. She stated that bureaucrats who did wrong should not only be fired but prosecuted. She expressed hope for a special counsel to investigate Arctic frost and for those who conducted illegal activity to face the full extent of accountability within the law. This represents a significant escalation. It's one thing to criticize past policies or to fire officials you believe acted inappropriately. It's another to call for criminal prosecutions of former government officials. Whether such prosecutions would be warranted depends entirely on what actually occurred, something that presumably would need to be established through investigation. This raises an important question for all of us. How do we balance the need for accountability with the risk of creating a cycle where each new administration prosecutes officials from the previous one? Where's the line between legitimate accountability and politicized revenge? Senator Blackburn observed that her Democratic colleagues seemed resistant to reform of the DOJ and FBI. Her interpretation of this resistance is striking. What this shows is that they don't want one tier of justice. What they want is two tiers of justice. It was their playbox. She's essentially arguing that Democrats benefited from having a DOJ that would pursue their political opponents while protecting their allies, and that's why they opposed reforms that would end such practices. This is obviously a highly partisan interpretation, and Democrats would certainly dispute it, likely arguing instead that they're concerned about politicizing law enforcement or about qualified professionals being fired for political reasons. But Senator Blackburn sees it differently. From her perspective, the previous system furthered their political goal, and that's why they want to preserve it. The hearing then shifted to a more concrete policy discussion: federal law enforcement assistance to Memphis, Tennessee. This portion of the exchange was notably less contentious and more collaborative. Senator Blackburn praised the Memphis Safe Task Force, which involves coordination between federal and state agencies to address violent crime. She cited impressive statistics: 321 arrests in just 1 week, 83 firearms seized, 7 missing children recovered, and 28 known gang members arrested. Over 120 federal indictments have resulted from this effort. The Attorney General confirmed he had recently visited Memphis with Secretary Noem, presumably the Secretary of Homeland Security, and that approximately 1,100 officers from at least 13 agencies were working together. He praised Memphis's Mayor, Paul Young, and Tennessee's Governor, Bill Lee, for their cooperation. This represents a very different model of federal-local cooperation than what's happening in cities like Portland and Chicago, which Senator Blackburn mentioned as missing out by not participating in similar task forces. The Attorney General was blunt about this, stating that whether liberal lawmakers in sanctuary cities want to or not, we are going to come in and make it safe for their citizens. What's your view on this approach? Should the federal government be able to deploy law enforcement resources to cities even when local officials don't want them there? Or does that violate principles of local control and federalism? Senator Blackburn raised concerns about Memphis's district attorney implementing what she called cashless bail, a system where defendants aren't required to post bail to be released before trial. She argued this creates a revolving door where police officers are seeing someone arrested and they're back out on the streets the next night committing crimes. The Attorney General agreed, stating that this is why his office is taking cases federally that we can because the DA has cashless bail, and no one is being held accountable in the local system. This touches on a broader national debate about criminal justice reform. Advocates of bail reform argue that cash bail systems are unfair to poor defendants who pose no danger but can't afford bail, while wealthier defendants who might be dangerous can buy their freedom. Critics of bail reform argue that it leads to defendants committing new crimes while awaiting trial. Senator Blackburn mentioned legislation she's working on with Representative Stefanik that would end cashless bail in Washington, D.C., and remove federal funds from jurisdictions that practice it. This represents a significant federal intervention into what has traditionally been a state and local matter. Near the end of her time, Senator Blackburn raised a concerning incident involving a Shelby County official who posted on social media about federal law enforcement operations in Memphis. The official tweeted the location of federal vehicles and officers, quote, in full gear and guns, essentially alerting potential criminals to law enforcement presence. Senator Blackburn called this action, quote, not called for, and mentioned legislation that would make a federal crime to dox federal law enforcement officials while they're doing their job. The concern is obvious. Publicizing the locations of law enforcement operations could endanger officers and allow criminals to evade arrest. The official reportedly took the tweet down, but Senator Blackburn's point is that an elected official should have known better than to post such information in the first place. This hearing segment reveals several important dynamics in current American politics. First, there's a fundamental disagreement about whether the DOJ and FBI were weaponized under the previous administration or whether current allegations of weaponization are themselves politically motivated. Second, there's a tension between federal and local authority, particularly regarding law enforcement in cities with progressive prosecutors and policies that the current administration opposes. Third, there's the question of accountability for government officials. If surveillance of senators occurred without proper legal authorization, that would be a serious abuse of power. But determining what actually happened, whether it was legal, and who should be held responsible requires careful investigation, not just political accusations. As we wrap up this analysis, consider this. In a democracy, how do we ensure that law enforcement agencies serve justice rather than political interests? Is the answer more oversight, different leadership, structural reforms, or something else entirely? Thank you for watching this analysis all the way through. This Senate hearing raises questions that go far beyond partisan politics. They touch on fundamental issues of constitutional governance, the rule of law, and the proper relationship between different branches of government. We want to hear from you. Do you believe Senator Blackburn's concerns about DOJ weaponization are legitimate? Do you support the aggressive federal law enforcement approach in cities like Memphis? And what do you think should happen to officials who allegedly abuse their authority? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone, and your perspectives help shape our future coverage. If you found this breakdown valuable and want more in-depth analysis of congressional hearings, Supreme Court decisions, and constitutional issues, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you never miss our content. We're committed to providing thorough, fair analysis that helps you understand what's really happening in Washington and why it matters for your life. Thank you for your time and attention. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you in the next video.